So we have some information that came out this morning from NFL insider Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated, who has a lot of contacts in the NFL. He puts out a Monday morning breakdown every single week on things around the NFL. And this morning he was asked a question about the Packers and Jets. And right now it seems like things have been, somewhat stagnant when it comes to trade talks. But Albert Breer does have some, I think it's his opinion, but he does have information from sources around the NFL, and I would assume that he has a good idea about what could potentially be going on in reality between these two teams. So he was asked in his article this morning, when will Aaron Rodgers get traded? He said this: Bruce, I think it'll happen sooner than people think because I don't think things between the Packers and Jets are in nearly as bad a place as some seem to believe they are. We mentioned earlier in the week the rapport between GMs Joe Douglas and Brian Gutekunst from their time coming up as young road scouts. The two head coaches, Robert Saleh and Matt LaFleur, are best friends. So any raw feelings between Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, I think, are manageable because of their relationships in place. Then he finishes, there's also been progress toward hammering out a deal in large part because despite the whole who's got leverage argument, there is reason for both sides to be motivated to get this one done. What will that deal look like? If I had to guess, I'd put it at either the 42nd or 43rd pick and a conditional pick or picks down the line. And to answer your question directly, I think it could happen as early as this week and certainly will get done before the draft. So have patience, Jets fans. Your quarterback is coming. So that's an interesting perspective there. He thinks it could get done as early as this week and certainly will get done before the draft. So it has seemed like the draft was maybe the first kind of deadline just because of the draft capital for 2023. The Packers clearly would prefer to have draft capital sooner rather than later. But to think that it could get done sooner because both sides sort of have a reason to want to get this done soon, which I do understand. The Jets obviously would like to have Aaron Rodgers as soon as possible. The Packers would probably like to get everything situated so that way it's not sort of awkward with Rodgers still being on the roster when OTAs start and things like that. It's probably best for the Packers if it's all Jordan Love. Rodgers has moved on and gets traded officially. It will be much smoother for the Packers. The thing that I think has been interesting is that at least from reports from different reporters over the past couple weeks, it seemed like the Packers really wanted that number one pick. The past few days, Brian Gutekunst said he doesn't necessarily need it, but he still thinks the Packers deserve premium capital because they are trading one of the best players of all time at the quarterback position in Aaron Rodgers. And so because, as Albert Breer notes, both teams do want to get this done sooner rather than later, so maybe they'll just decide to come to an agreement sooner so that way both sides can sort of move on. I have said personally, if the Jets were offering capital, which Brian Gutekunst doesn't think is enough for a player of Rodgers' caliber, then I think you just hold out longer, even if you have to hold out past the draft, because if you're not getting great capital, it doesn't even matter. Just move past the draft, hold on as long as you need to, because the Jets then will probably want to have Rodgers there at some point, not right before the season. The Packers could hold out that long if they're not getting the capital they need. Of course, the Packers still also will. It'll help them when it comes to getting Rodgers' contract off their books. And so it would be great for both sides if a deal gets done soon. But as I've said, it needs to be sufficient capital. If the Jets are just like, we'll just give you a third-round pick, Brian Gutekunst should say, no, I don't care about a third-round pick. You need to give me more than that. But maybe both sides will come to some agreement that sort of is reasonable because maybe the Packers, as Brian Gutekunst said, don't need the first-round pick, which I hope we get. Maybe he still wants it. Who knows? But if they can come to some kind of middle ground, I think it at least needs to be 2 seconds or a first. And yeah, either that's my opinion. 2 seconds or a first, I think, is sufficient. We'll see if that gets done. You could also add in a player there and maybe do a second and a player or two. That could make sense. But it is interesting. Albert Breer, who does have some inside sources around the league consistently, thinks it could get done this week. So I was thinking it was going to take longer because it seemed like things were sort of stagnant, but maybe things are getting done that aren't, that everyone doesn't know, because you could assume that Brian Gutekunst and Joe Douglas probably don't tell reporters or people who would tell reporters the information they're actually discussing. It's probably, talks could be a lot farther than it seems as reported from the media, because the media has said recently that talks are pretty stagnant, but maybe they're not as stagnant as it seems as reported by the media. And Albert Breer seemingly thinks to seems to believe that they're making more progress than maybe has been reported recently. So interesting information coming out this morning. If you guys would like to stay up to date with all Packers news, Packers, Jets, Aaron Rodgers, trade-related news, feel free to subscribe to the channel down below. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.